There's a question I've been asked a lot since I came out as gay.
Adam, how did you know you were gay?
Unlike my super fabulous brethren who embody a flamboyant order of nature, my natural way of expression never opened itself up towards the third-party assumption of my sexuality being anything other than straight. Figuring out my sexuality was one thing. Accepting that my sexuality needed to be labeled was another. So in this video, I want to break down and share with you the 5 things I went through when I was discovering my sense of self, specifically my sexuality, how I learnt to understand my body, and ultimately how I learnt to accept my differences and view them as a superpower instead of a disability. Before we begin, I want to give a quick shout out to this mobile app called Spectrum. It is a crowdsourced app that helps the queer community find safe queer spaces within their local regions. I'll talk a bit more about it towards the end of this video, so if that sounds interesting to you, please stay tuned to learn more. Also, as always, if you could tap the like button so others like yourself may find this video recommended to them through YouTube's algorithm, that would be wonderful. Number 1, your bodily response. The most obvious response to this was how my body reacted to external stimuli. In my case, the obvious reaction to the male anatomy. Besides finding myself substantially more interested in the male anatomy comparatively to the female counterpart, I remember thinking to myself, unless I've actually had physical experience with both genders, I will truly never actually know. That may not be true for everybody, but I remember my first sexual encounter with a male and a female person happened when I was 18. No, get your head out of the gutter. It didn't all happen at the same time. But I did experience sex in both these circumstances. And despite already knowing my substantial attraction towards the male anatomy, my body reacted confidently towards the female touch as well, which ultimately further confused me. In retrospect, I learned that our sense of touch is so powerful that even despite a lack of physical attraction, our bodies can react to the stimuli of touch in favorable ways. These encounters obviously didn't help me understand and accept myself straight away, but it ultimately laid the foundations I needed towards accepting my truth. Number 2, the feeling of guilt. On top of enjoying my encounter with another man, I also felt guilt. I remember as I walked away from that encounter, I told myself, now that you've got this experience out of your system, you can focus on moving on from this notion of same-sex attraction. And at that time, I went on and abstained from pursuing my same-sex attraction for quite some time after this. Nobody knew what I was going through, and I didn't have anybody know what I had experienced. Looking back, this guilt stemmed from a self-loathing I accepted from society as a form of punishment for being different to what was expected of me. Through my 20s, I battled with the idea of pursuing a relationship with the opposite sex as a way to overcome this guilt. Although I could grow emotionally invested in my relationships with the opposite sex, it dawned on me that my pursuits were futile, as my motivations towards being physically sexual with my female counterpart didn't grow with the relationship. If anything, it actually ceased to exist. And eventually, the guilt I had to face lying to her surpassed the guilt I had for my same-sex attraction. Number 3, a natural, intimate connection. In the process of pursuing my romantic relationships, I learned that in order to achieve a successful romantic relationship, it was important to have both the emotional and physical response reciprocate naturally, instead of having it forced. When I say forced, I mean that internal battle I had with myself to step up and perform. This didn't come naturally to me when I encountered physical intimacy with the opposite sex, as it did with a same-sex partner. Despite a growing emotional attachment to my female partners, my physical attachment towards the relationship never took off as I hoped it would. Instead, I would somewhat dread going through these sexual experiences of intimacy with my female partners. Not only because I didn't naturally feel the attraction, but as my emotions developed, I learned that the whole point of intimacy was to present yourself honestly. And in these circumstances, there was nothing honest with my approach. Although I appreciated the emotional value that we shared, every relationship I had with a female partner grew stunted very quickly. That's because I believe intimacy for myself required both a physical and emotional element, especially when I was trying to pursue romance. Number 4, understand the outcomes of honesty versus dishonesty. As my emotional intelligence grew through my experiences, so did my awareness of what it meant to be truly honest. I started really diving into deep thought about my future and how the value of honesty would affect my relationships. Did I want to have biological children so much that I was willing to lie to get what I wanted? Did I want to hide from my own shame behind a relationship that would ultimately affect the well-being of my own partner? Did I want to hold on to the guilt of knowing that I would have affected the life of another person just because I was incompetent to face my own truth? At face value, lying was the easy option. But I realized that over time, lying actually became more difficult and more troublesome as you build upon the stories on previous lies. Eventually, I knew I'd get tangled up in a web of lies that would affect my sense of reality. On the other hand, being honest was super difficult at the start. But as time went on, honesty makes life easier to live with because the stories you tell all come from a basis of authenticity. So technically, lying made it easier to forget the truth, but an authentic memory ultimately ended up being much easier to recall. And I knew which option I much preferred. Number 5, flip the question. How did you know you were straight? Eventually, I accepted my truth as a gay man and accepted the label that came with it. I started learning to be okay with calling myself gay, and by sharing that with others, my understanding of what that meant eventually changed from shame to pride. And then that's when this question started. Adam, how did you know you were gay? There were many steps in the process, but what made it easier to understand and eventually formulate an answer was when I broke down the differences and then used that as a retort. How did you know you were straight? I guess the same question works both ways because it begs you to check in. Did society mold you to accept being straight, or did you just know yourself? Because for me, although society thought of me as straight, I just knew inside of me that I was gay. And as time went on, I learned that the more we get to talk about the labels of our lives, the more we accept it as normal. And the more we get to accept it, the more other people will too. Now, before the end of this video, I mentioned this app called Spectrum that's available on both Apple and Android devices. Spectrum is an app that helps queer people find community by sharing community. What this means is that by submitting a safe queer space on the app, other people who can use the app can learn about these safe spaces and start building community through it. Whether it's a queer-friendly restaurant or bar, clinics, sporting venues, or recreational centers, if you're able to share your input in the app, others will be able to find it too. And to be honest, this is an app my sister co-developed after learning about my story and the importance of finding a safe community. Its functions are amazing and lends itself really well to spaces where queer-friendly venues are scarce and hard to find. I'd like to prompt you to try it out for yourselves and see if it serves to help you build upon the safe community everyone deserves. It's free to download and use, just look for this icon on the App Store. So, despite whatever journey you embark on, I hope my story lends itself to help you consider the potential outcome of your actions. I personally couldn't live a life lying to people that I love. That guilt made me reconsider my life trajectory, reassess the value of intimacy, and ultimately taught me how to be pragmatic in my journey towards honesty. Obviously, every circumstance and story is different, and you'll have to decide and evaluate your own outcomes. But despite that, I believe in order to rid the world of prejudice, it always starts with us. And ultimately, love always prevails when we're able to be authentically honest. Before you click off, if you're interested to learn a bit more about my background as a gay man, consider watching this video where I talk about what it's like growing up gay in a country that criminalizes my sexuality and the lessons I've learned along the way. Hit that like button, stay well, stay safe, and see you next time.